There is a strange moment that happens in many careers. You are sitting at your desk, doing work you know is good. You have met deadlines. You have solved problems. You have stayed late when necessary. You have answered messages that could easily have waited until morning. You have probably taken on responsibilities that were never formally added to your job description. And then, one afternoon, you hear that someone else has been promoted. Maybe they are talented, maybe they deserve it. But something about the decision still bothers you because you look at your own record and think, what else was I supposed to do? This question contains an assumption that feels reasonable, but can quietly mislead an entire career. We tend to imagine promotion as a kind of scoreboard: work hard, produce good results, accumulate enough points. Eventually, someone notices, but managers are rarely looking at a scoreboard. They are making a prediction. When a manager considers giving someone more responsibility, they are not only asking whether that person has performed well in the past. Somewhere beneath the conversation, another question is forming. What will happen if I give this person something bigger? That changes the meaning of almost everything. A deadline becomes more than a deadline. A mistake becomes more than a mistake. A difficult meeting becomes more than a difficult meeting. The way someone reacts when plans change, when information is incomplete, when another person disagrees, or when something goes wrong begins to reveal something about the kind of responsibility they might be ready to carry. And much of this is never said out loud. A manager may never tell an employee, "I noticed that you stayed calm when everyone else became defensive." They may never say, "I trust your judgment because you brought me a problem," without making it feel like a crisis. They may never explain that over months, they have formed an impression about whether this person makes situations clearer or more complicated. Yet those impressions can quietly influence decisions. This is the hidden psychology of promotion. It is not about learning how to perform for your manager. It is not about becoming louder, more political, or more impressive. And it certainly is not about pretending to be someone you are not. It is about understanding what people responsible for other people begin to notice when they are deciding who can safely carry greater responsibility. Because the most important signals may not be the ones employees think they are sending. You may believe you are demonstrating dedication. Your manager may be noticing reliability. You may believe you are demonstrating independence. Your manager may be wondering whether you exercise judgment. You may believe you are simply completing your work. Your manager may be quietly asking whether you understand what happens beyond it. The difference between those perspectives is where many career decisions become difficult to understand. Over the next several chapters, we will look beneath the visible parts of professional performance and examine the quieter evidence managers accumulate over time, how effort is interpreted, why certain behaviors create trust, how ownership becomes visible, what mistakes reveal, why some people make everyone around them better, and why even excellent work can become strangely invisible. Eventually, these pieces will form a larger picture. And once that picture becomes visible, promotion begins to look less like a mysterious decision made behind closed doors and more like the predictable result of signals that have been accumulating in plain sight. Chapter 1. The promotion is not a reward for effort. There is a particular kind of employee who is easy to admire. They are dependable. They respond quickly. They rarely refuse a request. When something needs to be finished, they find a way to finish it. If the team is under pressure, they stay late. If a colleague needs help, they step in. From the outside, it looks like an obvious formula for advancement. Work harder. Become indispensable. Eventually, the organization will reward you. But there is a problem with this formula. It confuses effort with value. The two are related, but they are not the same thing. Imagine two employees working on the same team. The first is constantly busy. Their calendar is full, their inbox is overflowing. They answer messages almost immediately and rarely leave a task unfinished. Their manager knows they work hard because the effort is visible almost every day. The second employee appears calmer. They complete their assignments, but they also notice recurring problems. They simplify a process that keeps wasting everyone's time. They recognize when a small issue could become a larger one and address it early. Their day may not look as exhausting. If a manager had to choose which person should take responsibility for a larger area, The decision might not come down to who worked harder. It might come down to who created more confidence about the future. This is where promotion decisions become psychologically interesting. People naturally value effort because effort is something we experience from the inside. We know how difficult the day felt. We remember the hours we spent, the pressure we tolerated, and the tasks we completed when we would rather have been somewhere else. But other people cannot see effort directly. They see its signals. They see the finished project, the quality of the decision, the number of problems prevented, the clarity of an update, the reaction when something unexpected happens. This creates a subtle gap between what work costs you and what your work produces for everyone else. A person can spend enormous energy carrying water in a leaky bucket. Another person might quietly repair the bucket. The first person may feel more exhausted. The second person may have created more value. That distinction becomes increasingly important as careers develop. Early in a career, much of professional life is about execution. Someone gives you a task, and you complete it well. The connection between effort and outcome is relatively direct, but as responsibility increases, the equation changes. Managers begin caring less about whether someone can simply handle a large workload, and more about whether that person can determine which work deserves attention in the first place. That is a different skill. Consider a manager who asks an employee to prepare a report by Friday. One employee spends the week producing an exceptionally detailed document, exactly following the original instructions. Another employee notices halfway through the week that the information requested is no longer the information leadership needs. Instead of blindly completing the assignment, they clarify the underlying decision, adjust the report, and explain why. Both worked. Only one demonstrated that they were paying attention to the purpose behind the work. This is why managers often value something that employees themselves underestimate: reduction of uncertainty. A strong employee does not merely produce output, they make the future easier to predict. When you give them a responsibility, you have some confidence that they will notice what matters. Communicate when circumstances change and avoid turning manageable problems into surprises. That confidence is valuable because management itself is largely an exercise in uncertainty. A manager cannot personally inspect every decision made by every person on a team. At some point, responsibility has to travel outward. And when responsibility travels outward, trust becomes part of the equation. This explains why an employee who works incredibly hard may still be overlooked. Their effort may be real. Their exhaustion may be real. Their contribution may even be substantial. But if all the manager can see is someone completing an endless stream of assigned tasks, the evidence may support the conclusion that this person is a strong executor. It does not necessarily answer the more important question: can this person be trusted to decide what matters when nobody gives them the instructions? That is not an accusation. It is simply a different standard. The uncomfortable part is that employees often respond to being overlooked by working even harder. They take on more tasks, they answer faster, they stay later, they try to prove their dedication through volume. And sometimes this works, but sometimes it creates the opposite impression. A person who accepts everything may appear committed, yet they may also appear unable to prioritize. A person who is always available may seem reliable, yet they may also signal that they have not learned to protect attention for higher value decisions. The irony is almost cruel. The behavior intended to prove readiness for greater responsibility can sometimes demonstrate the opposite. The deeper shift is not from working hard to working less. It is from asking, "How much can I do?" to asking, "What difference does what I do make?" That question changes how work is perceived. It changes what you notice, and eventually it changes what other people notice about you. Because once effort stops being the complete explanation for advancement, something else begins to matter: the quiet signals left behind by the way you work. Chapter 2: The Signals Behind the Words. A manager asks an employee, "How is the project going?" The employee says, "Good, we're on track." Nothing seems wrong with the answer, but imagine another employee receiving the same question. They say, "We're still on schedule. One supplier has been slower than expected, though. It hasn't affected the deadline yet, but if it continues for another week, It could. I've already contacted them, and I'll update you if the risk changes. The difference between these answers is small. Neither employee has necessarily done anything extraordinary. But the second answer gives the manager something valuable, a clearer picture of reality. This is one of the quietest ways managers evaluate people. They listen to words, but they are also listening for what those words reveal. Does this person understand what is happening? Do they recognize risk before it becomes a problem? Do they tell me what I need to know, or do I have to extract it from them? Can I trust their description of a situation when I am not there to see it myself? These questions are rarely asked explicitly. In many workplaces, they are answered through hundreds of tiny interactions. A meeting begins late. Someone receives unexpected criticism. A deadline moves. A colleague makes an error. A client changes their mind. A manager asks an uncomfortable question. The employee responds. Then the moment disappears, but the impression may remain. Human beings naturally make judgments from repeated patterns. Managers are no exception. In fact, managing people makes this unavoidable. A manager cannot observe everything. There are too many decisions, too many conversations, too many competing priorities. So the mind begins using shortcuts, not necessarily unfair shortcuts, necessary ones. If an employee repeatedly says a project is fine, and then reveals problems at the last possible moment, the manager learns something. If another person consistently communicates uncertainty early without creating unnecessary panic, the manager learns something else. Over time, these patterns become reputation, and reputation is more complicated than a collection of achievements. Imagine an employee named Daniel, who is extremely talented. His work is often excellent, but when someone challenges his idea in a meeting, his face changes. He becomes defensive. He interrupts. Later, he may calm down and produce the right solution anyway. Now imagine Maya, whose work is equally strong. When someone disagrees with her, she asks a question. What are you seeing that I might be missing? That sentence may take 5 seconds, but psychologically it sends a powerful signal. It suggests that Maya's identity is not completely attached to being right. That matters because greater responsibility creates more situations in which being wrong is unavoidable. A manager deciding whether to promote someone is therefore not simply evaluating competence. They are evaluating how competence behaves under pressure. This is where intelligent people sometimes misunderstand workplace perception. They assume that because their intentions are good, their behavior will be interpreted generously. But intentions are private. Behavior is evidence. An employee may think, I challenged that idea because I care about the quality of the work. A manager may experience it as unnecessary resistance. Another employee may think, I stayed quiet because I didn't want to create conflict. A manager may interpret the same silence as a lack of judgment or confidence. This does not mean every managerial interpretation is correct. Managers can misunderstand people. Bias exists. Organizational politics exist. Personal preferences exist. But understanding this does not make perception irrelevant. It makes perception more important to understand. One of the most revealing signals is what happens when employees receive bad news. Suppose a manager says, the client didn't like the presentation. One person immediately explains why the client misunderstood it. Another says, I thought the presentation was clear, but I can see 2 places where we may have made the decision harder than it needed to be. Let me review those. The second response does not require self-blame. It demonstrates something more useful: psychological flexibility. The ability to encounter information that threatens your original view without immediately defending yourself against it. That quality becomes increasingly important with responsibility. The more senior the role, the more frequently reality disagrees with expectations. Plans fail. People misunderstand instructions. Forecasts turn out to be wrong. Customers behave differently than expected. A person who needs to protect their image every time something goes wrong eventually becomes difficult to trust with complicated decisions. A person who can absorb new information, update their view, and keep moving creates a different experience. They reduce uncertainty, and this is why managers often notice emotional patterns that employees barely recognize in themselves. Who becomes frantic when priorities change? Who becomes passive? Who starts blaming? Who becomes unusually quiet? Who asks useful questions? Who can deliver bad news without turning it into drama? None of these behaviors determines a person's worth, but together, repeated over time, they help answer a practical managerial question. What will this person be like when the stakes are higher? That is the hidden layer beneath many everyday interactions. The manager is not always thinking, "This person would make a good leader." Sometimes the judgment is much simpler. "I would feel comfortable giving this person something important." That feeling may never appear in a performance review. It may never be spoken during a promotion discussion, yet it can become one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the room. Because eventually, a manager has to decide whether responsibility will create relief or additional supervision. And that distinction brings us closer to the real psychology of promotion. The question is not only whether you can complete what you are given, it is whether people can trust what you will do when nobody has told you exactly what to do. Chapter 3. The Ownership Test. There is a subtle difference between someone who waits for work and someone who notices what needs to be done. You can see it in a small workplace moment. A team discovers that a report contains an error. The mistake is not catastrophic, but someone needs to investigate it before the report goes to senior leadership. The manager says, "Can someone take a look at this?" One employee asks, "What exactly would you like me to check?" Another says, "I'll trace where the number came from and see whether anything else was affected." Neither response is wrong. The first person is waiting for a defined assignment. The second has already begun defining the problem. That distinction is easy to miss because both people may eventually complete the same task. But responsibility changes when the problem itself becomes part of the job. This is one reason promotion is not simply an extension of doing your current job well. At some point, the nature of the work changes. You are no longer being evaluated only on whether you can follow a map. People begin watching whether you can recognize that the map is incomplete. That quality is often described as ownership. But ownership is misunderstood. It does not mean taking control of everything. It does not mean inserting yourself into every problem or making decisions that belong to someone else. Real ownership is more disciplined than that. It means noticing consequences. A person with ownership sees a task as part of a larger chain. The email affects the meeting affects the decision affects the customer affects the next quarter. Most employees are not expected to think about every consequence of every action. That would be exhausting and impossible. But people trusted with greater responsibility gradually develop a wider responsibility horizon. They naturally look a little farther ahead. Consider an employee who notices that a deadline is technically achievable, but only if 3 other teams respond on time. They could simply continue working and hope everything aligns. Or they could recognize the dependency, contact the relevant people, and tell their manager, "We're still on schedule, but these 2 dependencies could create a problem. I've checked both, and here's where they stand." That is ownership without drama. The employee has not taken over anyone else's job. They have simply refused to pretend that their piece of the work exists in isolation. Psychologically, this matters because managers are often forced to operate at a wider level. They are constantly asking what might happen next. So when an employee begins thinking in the same direction, something changes. The manager no longer has to supply every connection. The employee is helping carry the mental load. And this may be one of the least visible benefits of promotion. A promotion does not merely give someone more work. It transfers some of the responsibility for noticing what matters. That is why managers often remember employees who solve problems that nobody formally assigned to them. Not because they worked extra hours, because they reduced the number of things that required supervision. There is an important psychological distinction here. People who are highly motivated by approval often ask, "What do you want me to do?" People who have developed ownership begin asking, "What outcome are we trying to create?" The difference may sound small. It is not. The first question is centered on instructions. The second is centered on consequences, and consequences are where judgment begins. Imagine 2 project leads facing an unexpected delay. One immediately sends a message to the manager, "We're going to miss the deadline." What should I do? The other says, the delay puts Friday at risk. I see 3 options. We can reduce the scope, move the deadline, or add another person for the final stage. Here's what each option would cost. The second person has not necessarily made the better decision yet, but they have done something valuable before the decision was even made. They have transformed a vague problem into a manageable one. That is ownership. It is also why ownership cannot be faked for very long. Someone can imitate the language of responsibility. They can say, "I'll take care of it." But eventually the details expose whether they actually understood what they were taking responsibility for. True ownership tends to show up in follow-through. It appears when nobody reminds you. It appears when the first solution fails. It appears when the result is inconvenient. And especially it appears when the problem is partly yours but not entirely yours. That last situation is revealing. Suppose a project fails because another team made an error. An employee can truthfully say, "That wasn't my fault." Maybe it wasn't. But a person operating with ownership might ask a second question. Was there anything I could have noticed earlier? That question is not about accepting blame for everything. It is about learning where influence existed. This is where ownership becomes psychologically mature. Without maturity, ownership can turn into over-responsibility. A person starts believing they must fix everything, control everyone, and carry every outcome personally. That is not leadership, it is anxiety wearing the clothes of responsibility. Healthy ownership has boundaries. It knows what belongs to you, what belongs to someone else, and where coordination is necessary between the two. Managers notice that distinction. They notice the employee who acts without waiting, but also knows when to ask. They notice the person who takes initiative without becoming reckless. They notice someone who can say, "This is mine to solve," and also, "This part requires your decision." That combination is rare because it requires both confidence and restraint, and it reveals something deeper about readiness. When a manager promotes someone, they are not simply asking whether the person can carry a heavier workload. They are asking whether the person can carry a larger field of consequences without needing someone else to point out every important connection. That is why the strongest evidence of readiness often appears before the promotion is available. It appears in ordinary moments when no new title is waiting. A problem appears. Instructions are incomplete. Nobody is clearly responsible, and someone quietly notices what needs to happen next. That moment may never receive applause, but it tells a manager something that a perfect resume cannot. It tells them how a person behaves when responsibility has not yet been officially handed to them. And that raises a more revealing question. What happens when the person who has been trusted to take ownership discovers that their judgment was wrong? Chapter 4. What happens when things go wrong? Success can tell a manager that you are capable. Failure can reveal what that capability is made of. This is why some of the most important moments in a career happen on days when nothing goes according to plan. A client rejects the proposal. A deadline is missed. A number in a presentation turns out to be wrong. A colleague misunderstands an instruction. A project that looked promising quietly begins to fall apart. Nobody wants these moments, but they are unusually informative. Imagine a manager discovering an error in a report shortly before an important meeting. The employee responsible immediately begins explaining. The information came from another team. The original instructions weren't clear. I didn't have enough time to check everything. Each explanation might be true. That is what makes these moments psychologically complicated. Defensiveness is not always dishonesty. Often it is self-protection. When something threatens our image of ourselves as competent, responsible people, the mind searches for a way to restore that image. We instinctively look for context that reduces the threat, and sometimes the context genuinely matters. But a manager may be listening for something else, not who is guilty. Instead, can this person look directly at an uncomfortable reality without needing to escape from it? That is a very different question. Now imagine another employee facing the same situation. They say, "The number was wrong. I traced where it came from and I should have checked the source before using it. The other team did provide the original figure, but I was responsible for the final report. I've corrected it and I've added a verification step so we don't repeat the problem." Notice what is missing. There is no dramatic confession, no unnecessary self-criticism, no performance of humility, just an accurate description of what happened. That distinction matters. Healthy accountability is not the same as accepting blame for everything. It is the ability to separate responsibility from shame. Shame asks, "What does this mistake say about me?" Responsibility asks, "What actually happened, and what can I learn from it?" The first question pulls attention toward identity. The second pulls attention toward reality. Managers tend to trust the second mindset because larger responsibilities require repeated contact with imperfect information. The higher someone rises, the less likely it becomes that every decision will be obviously correct. There will be incomplete data. There will be competing priorities. There will be people who disagree. There will be decisions that looked reasonable at the time and turned out badly later. A person who experiences every mistake as a threat to their identity may begin hiding information. And hidden information is dangerous in organizations. A small problem that becomes visible early can often be solved. The same problem, concealed until it becomes undeniable, can become expensive. This is why managers sometimes value bad news delivered early more than good news delivered late. Consider a project manager who notices that a major deadline is becoming unrealistic. They have two choices. They can remain optimistic, hoping the team catches up. Or they can tell their manager, "We are not in trouble yet, but the current pace makes the deadline unlikely. I think we should discuss the options now." The second conversation may be uncomfortable, but it creates room for action. This is one of the quietest forms of professional maturity, making reality visible while there is still time to respond to it. And it reveals something deeper about trust. Trust is not the belief that someone will never make mistakes. That would be impossible. Trust is closer to the belief that when something important changes, the person will help you see it clearly. This is why emotional regulation matters. Imagine a team meeting where a manager challenges an employee's proposal. The employee becomes visibly irritated. Their voice changes. They start speaking faster. They interrupt questions before they are finished. Nothing catastrophic has happened, but the room learns something. The employee may be highly intelligent. Their proposal may even be correct. Yet everyone has just received information about what disagreement does to them. Now imagine someone else hearing the same criticism. They pause. "That's a fair concern, let me think about it." Perhaps they defend the idea afterward. Perhaps they change it completely. The important part is not whether they surrender. It is that they can receive pressure without immediately becoming controlled by it. This is sometimes mistaken for confidence. It is actually closer to emotional flexibility. Confidence says, "I can survive being wrong." Emotional flexibility says, "I can remain useful while I find out whether I am wrong." That distinction becomes more important with seniority because authority increases the consequences of emotional reactions. A junior employee losing patience may create an awkward conversation. A senior employee losing patience can change the behavior of an entire team. People become quieter. They stop bringing problems forward. They wait until issues are undeniable. The leader then receives less information and may mistakenly believe everything is under control. This is how emotional behavior becomes an operational problem. The person's mood is no longer merely personal. It changes what other people feel safe enough to communicate. That is why managers often remember how someone behaved when things went wrong. They are not expecting perfect composure. They are looking for something more realistic. Can this person stay connected to the problem? Can they hear information they dislike? Can they acknowledge uncertainty? Can they correct course without turning the moment into a referendum on their worth? And perhaps most importantly, can other people still tell them the truth? Because responsibility eventually becomes a relationship with reality. You cannot lead what you cannot see, and you cannot see what people are afraid to tell you. This is why a mistake can sometimes strengthen a professional reputation rather than damage it. The error itself may be forgotten. What remains is the experience of watching someone handle it. Did they hide? Did they blame? Did they panic? Did they learn? Did they make the situation clearer for everyone else? These are the moments in which a manager begins forming a very different kind of judgment. Not whether you are flawless, whether you are safe to trust with reality, when reality is inconvenient. And once a person can be trusted with difficult information, another question naturally follows. What happens when their influence extends beyond their own work, and the performance of other people begins to depend on the way they behave? Chapter 5. The person who makes everyone better. There is a point in many careers when individual performance stops being the whole story. You can be the person who consistently delivers the strongest work on the team. But if your presence makes everyone around you slower, more cautious, or more dependent, your value has a ceiling. This can be difficult to notice because individual excellence is easy to measure. A project is finished, a target is reached, a difficult problem is solved. But the effect one person has on other people is often much quieter. Consider a meeting where a complicated decision has to be made. One employee has the answer immediately. They explain it confidently. They know the numbers. They can defend their position from almost every angle. Another employee knows less about the technical details, but they ask a question that reveals the team has been solving the wrong problem. The meeting changes direction. The second employee may have contributed fewer words, yet they change the quality of the thinking in the room. That is a different kind of performance, and as responsibility grows, it becomes increasingly valuable. Managers eventually have to ask not only, how good is this person, but also, what happens to the people around them because this person is here? The answer can be surprisingly revealing. Some highly capable people create dependence. Everyone goes to them for answers. They become the person who knows everything, fixes everything, and quietly rescues everyone. At first, this looks like leadership. Sometimes it is. But there is another possibility. The person has become indispensable because nobody else has been allowed to become capable. That distinction matters. Imagine an employee named Elena, who is exceptionally good at solving a recurring technical problem. Whenever someone encounters it, they call Elena. She responds quickly and fixes it. Her reputation grows. People praise her expertise. But after several months, the manager notices something strange. The team has learned almost nothing from Elena. The same questions keep returning. Elena is performing brilliantly, but the system around her is becoming more dependent on her. Now imagine another employee who encounters the same problem. Instead of simply fixing it, they explain the reasoning, document the solution, and help the other person understand how to handle it next time. The immediate result may take longer. The long-term result is different. The second employee has increased the team's capacity. This is one of the quiet transitions from individual contribution toward leadership. Leadership is not simply the ability to produce good answers. It is the ability to make good answers less dependent on your personal presence. That idea can feel counterintuitive. People naturally protect expertise because expertise creates status. If you are the only person who knows how something works, people need you. And being needed feels valuable. Psychologically, it can even become rewarding. But organizations do not necessarily need people who are permanently needed. They need people who make the organization stronger. That requires a different emotional orientation. It means being willing to share information instead of guarding it. It means giving credit even when you could easily take it. It means helping a colleague become independent rather than enjoying their dependence. It means disagreeing with an idea without turning disagreement into a judgment about the person who proposed it. These behaviors may seem minor. Collectively, they create culture. Think about two managers. The first is brilliant but unpredictable. Team members carefully choose their words around them. Meetings are dominated by the manager's opinion. People often wait for approval before acting because they do not want to make a mistake. The second manager may be less impressive in the conventional sense, but people speak openly around them. They can challenge an idea. They know where decisions stand. They understand why something changed. And when someone makes a mistake, the conversation focuses on learning rather than humiliation. The second environment may produce better decisions even if the second manager is not the smartest person in the room. Why? Because intelligence is only useful when other people can think alongside it. This is where social intelligence becomes part of professional value. It is not charm. It is not being universally liked. It is the ability to understand that every interaction changes the conditions under which other people perform. A sarcastic comment can make someone less willing to speak. A public correction can make another person hide uncertainty next time. Giving someone credit can make them more willing to contribute again. Explaining the reasoning behind a decision can reduce resistance even when people disagree with the decision itself. None of these behaviors guarantees a good team, but they alter the psychological environment. And managers notice environments. They notice whether meetings become clearer after someone speaks. They notice whether people seek someone's judgment because they trust it or because they are afraid to act without permission. They notice who can disagree without creating unnecessary friction. They notice who takes credit when things go well and who shares it. They notice who quietly helps the strongest people on the team become stronger. This is why influence can exist long before authority. An employee does not need direct reports to demonstrate leadership. They can demonstrate it through the effect they have on the quality of work around them. There is also a deeper reason managers care about this. A promotion often expands a person's impact. If someone becomes responsible for a larger team, project, or function, their individual output matters less than the output they enable through others. A manager cannot personally complete every task. They cannot attend every conversation. They cannot solve every problem. Their effectiveness becomes multiplied or diminished by the people around them. So when a manager sees someone consistently improving the performance of others, they may be seeing evidence of a capacity that is difficult to teach later. The strongest signal is not always, "People listen to this person." It may be, "People become better thinkers around this person." That is a much deeper form of influence, and it changes the meaning of ambition. If you are always trying to prove that you are the most capable person in the room, you may accidentally make yourself the center of every solution. But if you begin asking, "What becomes possible for other people because I am here?" your role changes. You stop measuring your value only by what passes through your own hands. You begin noticing what continues to work after your hands leave it. That is one of the clearest signs that someone is ready for broader responsibility. But there is a complication. Even people who create tremendous value can become strangely invisible when their contribution is familiar enough. Sometimes the very consistency that makes someone dependable makes their impact harder to notice. And that brings us to a peculiar problem in professional life: the possibility that doing excellent work repeatedly can eventually make excellent work look ordinary. Chapter 6: The Familiarity Trap. There is a strange paradox in being dependable. The better you become at preventing problems, the fewer problems there are for anyone to notice. When an employee consistently delivers, responds sensibly, and keeps things moving, the performance can gradually disappear into the background, not because it has become less valuable, because it has become expected. Imagine someone who manages a complicated weekly process. During their first few months, every improvement is obvious. They eliminate delays. They fix recurring errors. They reorganize the workflow. Their manager notices the difference because the difference is visible. A year later, everything simply works. Meetings happen on time, reports arrive when expected. Small problems are handled before they become large ones. The manager stops thinking about the process. That is, in one sense, the highest compliment the employee could receive. The system works, but psychologically, something else has happened. Success has become the baseline. This is one version of the familiarity trap. Human attention is naturally drawn toward change. When something improves dramatically, we notice it. When the improvement becomes normal, our attention moves elsewhere. The same principle operates outside work. You notice a new sound in your house immediately. You barely notice the refrigerator running after you have lived there for years. You notice when a normally quiet colleague suddenly becomes difficult. You may not notice the hundreds of ordinary days when they were consistently easy to work with. The workplace is full of this kind of attention, and it creates an uncomfortable reality for highly competent employees. Reliability can become invisible precisely because it is reliable. This does not mean an employee should manufacture problems so their contribution becomes visible. It means something more subtle. Value has to be understandable. A manager cannot advocate for an impact they cannot clearly describe. Suppose an employee spends 6 months quietly improving a process. They know it saved hours every week. Their colleagues know it too. But when promotion discussions arrive, the manager remembers a general impression. She's very dependable. That is positive. But it is less informative than understanding exactly what the employee changed, what problem disappeared, and what became possible afterward. This is where visibility becomes different from self-promotion. Self-promotion asks, how can I make people think I'm impressive? Useful visibility asks, how can people accurately understand what I contributed? Those are not the same goal. One is centered on image, the other is centered on information. Consider two employees after completing a difficult project. The first says very little. They assume the results will speak for themselves. The second does not boast. Instead, during a normal update, they explain, we finished the project 2 weeks early. The biggest change was simplifying the approval process. That removed the delay we'd been seeing in the first stage. That statement is not an advertisement. It is context. It helps the manager understand the mechanism behind the result. This matters because outcomes without context can be surprisingly difficult to interpret. If a team suddenly becomes faster, who caused it? If a customer remains satisfied during a difficult period, what prevented the relationship from deteriorating? If a recurring problem disappears, did someone solve it, or did circumstances simply change? Managers have limited information. They are not sitting beside every employee watching every decision, so they infer. And when information is incomplete, the mind fills gaps using whatever evidence is available. This is where reputation becomes powerful. Reputation is not merely what people say about you. It is the accumulated expectation of how you are likely to behave. If a manager repeatedly sees someone identify risks early, communicate clearly, and follow through, future actions are interpreted through that history. A small problem from that employee may be seen as an exception. The same problem from someone with a reputation for unreliability may confirm an existing concern. This is not always fair. Human judgment is never perfectly neutral. Once people form an impression, confirmation bias can influence what they notice afterward. They may pay more attention to information that supports their existing belief and overlook information that contradicts it. That means reputation can become self-reinforcing, which makes the way it is built especially important. You cannot completely control another person's perception, but you can create consistent evidence, and consistency is more persuasive than occasional brilliance. Think about someone who delivers one spectacular presentation but regularly misses small commitments. Now compare them with someone whose work is rarely dramatic but almost always thoughtful, timely, and dependable. When the organization needs someone to take responsibility for an uncertain project, the second person may feel like the safer choice. Not because they are more talented in every dimension, because their pattern contains fewer unanswered questions. This reveals something important about promotion decisions. Managers are often not searching for the most impressive person. They are searching for the person whose future behavior seems easiest to trust, and trust is built through repeated evidence. This also explains why visibility should not be confused with constant exposure. You do not need to speak in every meeting. You do not need to remind everyone of every accomplishment. You do not need to turn every useful action into a story about yourself. In fact, excessive self-promotion can create its own signal. People can become so focused on being seen that they stop noticing what the situation actually requires. The stronger approach is quieter. Make outcomes clear. Explain relevant decisions. Share useful context. Give credit to other people. Let your contribution become understandable without making yourself the center of the story. There is another reason this matters. Managers do not promote someone simply because they know that person is good. They often have to explain the decision to other people. A manager may need to justify why one employee should receive more responsibility, more authority, or a larger role. That becomes easier when the evidence is concrete. She's excellent is vague. She improved this process, reduced recurring problems, communicates risks early, and has already begun operating beyond her formal responsibilities is a case. This is why visibility is not vanity. It is part of organizational decision-making. But there is a deeper danger in all of this. Once people understand that perception matters, they can become obsessed with managing perception. They begin monitoring every interaction. They wonder whether every sentence sounded confident enough, whether every meeting made them look ambitious enough, whether their manager noticed that they stayed late. At that point, visibility becomes another form of insecurity. The goal is not to perform readiness. The goal is to develop qualities that remain visible, even when you are not trying to display them. That brings the entire psychology of promotion into sharper focus. Effort matters, results matter, reliability matters, judgment matters, ownership matters, social impact matters, visibility matters. But none of these signals exists in isolation. Together, they answer a much larger question. When responsibility expands, what kind of person will this employee become under the weight of it? That is the question underneath the promotion conversation. And once we see it that way, the individual signals stop looking like separate tricks for career advancement. They begin to form a single system. If you step back from everything we have examined, promotion begins to look less mysterious. The employee who gets promoted is not necessarily the hardest worker, not necessarily the most charismatic, not necessarily the person who speaks most confidently in meetings, and not even necessarily the person with the strongest individual performance. What managers are gradually building is a picture of what happens when responsibility increases. That picture can be understood through a simple model, the promotion signal stack. Think of it as 6 layers of evidence. The first is results. Can you produce something that matters? Without results, everything else becomes difficult to defend. Good intentions do not replace outcomes. Competence has to leave some evidence behind. But results are only the foundation. The second layer is reliability. Can people depend on those results? A brilliant performance that appears once is interesting. Consistent performance changes how people plan around you. Reliability tells others that your good work is not an accident. They have to hope will happen again. Then comes judgment. This is where the question changes from "can you do the work?" to "can you decide what should happen when the instructions are incomplete?" Judgment becomes visible when priorities compete. Information is imperfect, and no option is completely safe. Above judgment sits ownership. Ownership asks whether you naturally notice the consequences surrounding your work. Do you see the dependency before it becomes a delay? Do you recognize the problem nobody formally assigned to you? Do you understand where your responsibility ends and where coordination needs to begin? Then comes social impact. This is the layer that becomes increasingly important as your influence expands. Do people become clearer around you? Do they become more capable? Can they disagree with you without becoming defensive? Do you make it easier for others to contribute honestly? A person who performs well alone may be valuable. A person who improves the conditions under which other people perform can become much more valuable. And finally, there is visibility, not attention, not self-promotion. Visibility means that the value you create can actually be understood by the people making decisions. This last layer is easy to misunderstand because it can feel unfair. You may think, if I did the work, shouldn't that be enough? Ideally, perhaps. But organizations operate through imperfect information. Managers cannot see every contribution. They make decisions from evidence that reaches them. So the stack is not a collection of tricks. It is a way of understanding how professional trust accumulates and the layers interact. Results without reliability can look like potential mixed with uncertainty. Reliability without judgment can create a dependable executor who still needs direction. Judgment without ownership can produce smart decisions that remain narrowly focused. Ownership without social intelligence can become control. Strong performance without visibility can remain poorly understood. The stack matters because promotion is not really about moving upward on a ladder of achievement. It is about expanding the amount of uncertainty other people are willing to let you carry. A manager is essentially making a prediction. If I step back, will this person move the work forward? If something changes, will they recognize it? If something goes wrong, will they tell me? If other people are involved, will their leadership make things clearer or more difficult? And beneath all of those questions sits one deeper judgment. Can I trust this person with consequences I cannot personally supervise? That is why the signals accumulate over time. One good meeting rarely changes a career. One mistake rarely defines it. One impressive project rarely tells the entire story. Patterns do. The promotion signal stack is therefore not a strategy for appearing ready. It is a way of seeing what readiness actually looks like. And once you understand that, the question becomes more interesting. You stop asking only whether your manager sees your effort. You begin asking what your repeated behavior is teaching them to expect from you. Because eventually, reputation becomes prediction. And promotion is, at its core, a decision about which predictions an organization is willing to trust. Think back to the employee from the beginning. The person who worked hard, delivered good work, stayed late when necessary, and quietly wondered why advancement seemed to happen for other people. Perhaps the problem was never a lack of effort. Perhaps the problem was the assumption that effort was the complete language of professional value. It is not. Workplaces contain another language, one that is rarely written into job descriptions. It is the language of trust. A manager watches what happens when plans change. They notice whether you bring problems early or hide them until they become unavoidable. They notice whether you need instructions for every decision or whether you can recognize what matters when the instructions stop. They notice whether your presence makes other people more capable or more dependent. They notice whether your judgment remains useful when you are under pressure. And eventually, all of these observations become something more powerful than a list of accomplishments. They become an expectation. This person is likely to handle responsibility this way. That is what makes promotion so different from simply receiving praise for good work. Praise looks backward. Promotion looks forward. Praise says, "You did something valuable." Promotion says, "We believe you can be trusted with something larger." That distinction changes how ordinary moments look. A difficult meeting is no longer just a difficult meeting. It is an opportunity to reveal how you respond to disagreement. A mistake is no longer simply something to survive. It becomes evidence of how you relate to reality when reality challenges your self-image. A colleague asking for help becomes more than an interruption. It can reveal whether your influence creates dependence or capability. A problem nobody has formally assigned becomes a small test of whether you notice consequences beyond your own task. None of this means turning every workplace interaction into a performance. That would defeat the point. If you spend your career constantly asking, "How am I being perceived?" you may become so focused on the observer that you stop paying attention to the work itself. The better question is quieter. What kind of evidence am I repeatedly giving people about the responsibility I can carry? That question does not require pretending. It requires consistency, because the strongest professional reputation is not built through one impressive moment. It is built through ordinary moments that keep telling the same story. You communicate clearly. You follow through. You notice what matters. You handle difficult information without making it harder to see. You make thoughtful decisions when certainty is unavailable. You help other people become stronger. And when your contribution matters, you make its value understandable. Eventually, something interesting happens. You no longer have to convince everyone that you are ready. The pattern begins doing the convincing for you. This is perhaps the deepest lesson hidden inside the psychology of promotion. Career growth is not simply about becoming more impressive. It is about becoming more trustworthy at a larger scale. The title comes afterward. The evidence comes first. And much of that evidence is created when nobody announces that anyone is watching. So the next time you walk into a meeting, face an unexpected problem, disagree with a colleague, receive difficult feedback, or discover that something has gone wrong, you might see the moment differently. Not as another test you have to pass, not as another opportunity to prove yourself, just as another piece of evidence, another ordinary moment in which your habits quietly answer a question that may not yet have been asked. What happens when more responsibility is placed in your hands? The answer is not created on the day someone offers you the promotion. By then, the answer has usually been forming for a long time.